Hello! Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And here is my spoiler-free review of F1 the movie, or Formula 1 the movie, directed by Joseph Kosinski, who did a fantastic job with the Top Gun sequel, Top Gun Maverick, as well as the sequel to Tron Legacy, two movies that I really liked. And so when it comes to F1, I'm not really a fan of Formula 1. Like, I like cars and I like fast cars, but when it comes to the sport, F1, I'm not particularly a fan. I'm intrigued by it, but it's not something that I've ever really got into. And so the story of F1 follows former Formula 1 driver Sonny Hayes, who returns to the sport decades after a career-ending crash in the 1990s. Recruited by his old friend Ruben Cervantes, now the owner of the struggling Apex Grand Prix team, Sonny is brought in to save the team from complete failure, as well as mentor a rising star, rookie driver Joshua Pierce. And to just touch back on what I just said about, not being particularly a fan of Formula 1, that's not me saying that you have to be a fan of Formula 1 or follow Formula 1 to enjoy or get something out of this movie, because at the end of the day, it all depends on its story and its characters. And what I will say about Formula 1 right off the bat here is I had a hell of a lot of fun with this movie. There is a lot that I liked about this movie in sort of from a technical perspective, from the way in which it was all brought to life. Like, don't get me wrong, this isn't going to be the most complex, emotionally deep experience that you're going to have in the cinema this year. But there was just something about how everything was brought together, from the story to the characters to how the racing scenes are brought to life from a technical perspective, visually. There is a very kind of old, traditional sort of style of filmmaking here within sort of the movie's DNA, within the essence of the film. It's very kind of traditional in regards to how the movie is brought to life. And that is something that I absolutely adored about this movie. It has a sort of filmmaking of old vibe to it. It feels like a movie that came from the 90s or the early 2000s. And I think that is one of the main reasons why this movie works. Yes, it's not the most complex, emotionally deep experience you're going to get, but it's one that, without a doubt, for me anyway, personally, effectively got me to care for its characters. Like, I cared about these characters and it emotionally swept me up in the moments that were designed to. There is enough here within the writing and the performances that allowed me to some degree care about our characters and their journeys. And I just said, but the movie managed to sort of emotionally sweep me up in moments, and that's not something that I expected to say while reviewing this movie. But the film does. For me, it managed to sort of sweep me up emotionally. Again, this is not one of those movies that I came out of feeling all emotionally drained, because I just sat through this very sort of emotionally intense and profound experience. But there was enough there in regards to the writing and with how the characters are not only written but brought to life within the performances, as well as how the narrative was crafted and how it plays out, to how the racing scenes are brought to life, that just allowed me to, in moments, get emotionally swept up. And also, I felt satisfied. Like, coming out of this experience, even though it wasn't something that was completely mind-blowing, like, at the end of the day, this was, it was a very familiar experience. It was a very predictable experience. It's very cliched. There is nothing majorly new in this movie. It's all very familiar and, it is very predictable. But it's all those kind of pieces of the puzzle, whether it be the writing to the performances to how the movie was crafted from a technical perspective, it still managed to give me an effective experience. It took me back to sort of a certain era of filmmaking. I had fun. It was in moments intense, and there are moments that, I I teared up a little because I cared about the characters and their journey, specifically Brad Pitt's character, Sonny Hayes. And I think Brad Pitt here is fantastic. You know, the racing scenes in this movie, the way they are constructed, the way they're brought to life for this film was incredible. They are superb. They are very immersive. And, you know, it's just from the way in which the cameras would be positioned, whether it be, you know, inside the car or on the side of the car, but above the wheel, and just how the camera was used. They're very dynamic and it just sweeps you up. And another, you know, going back to sort of traditional filmmaking here, there's very, very little reliance on CGI. You know, that's something that I really appreciated. And maybe maybe there was a lot more CGI than I realised or was aware of. But it's very well disguised. For me, this movie, you know, uses CGI when it really needs to, but I'll be honest with you, I found it hard to kind of pick up on where the CGI was used because everything felt so authentic. Like, it just felt like we were actually there watching this race play out, but it was like we were there with the drivers due to where the cameras are positioned, and so it sort of sweeps you up within kind of the intensity and sort of that kind of the emotional rush of the moment. And what I really liked about it was it didn't kind of rely, again, going back to the CGI, when you get a lot of these racing, you know, these car movies, wherever it be Rush or Gran Turismo, or, you know, even the Fast and Furious movies, it doesn't rely, these moments with the racing, they don't rely on using the camera and sort of having this kind of moment where you sort of dive into the engine and you're in the pistons and you've kind of got this this CGI recreation of what's going on inside of the engine. Even though I kind of don't mind that in those other movies, I kind of like that they didn't go down that route here, because for me, it added to the sort of the authenticity of these moments and these scenes. And instead, it just relies on these kind of camera sort of positions and how these moments are framed. Instead, it relies on the drama with the characters and sort of what it is the characters' motivations are and desires and sort of the interaction between the characters within this race. It relies purely on that character drama and the relationships with these characters. And that's how these moments were very effective. It didn't need this kind of quick moment of the camera sort of diving right into the car so you could see what's going on inside it, just to sort of almost artificially engineer this energy and sort of intensity within the moment. It didn't need that, because you already had these characters that, yes, granted, are not the most complex or deep characters that you're going to have on the big screen this year, but there's enough there within the writing for you to, well, for me anyway, personally, to get behind them emotionally and care. And yeah, like I've said, you know, it is very predictable. It is very familiar. You know, there are moments which are quite corny and kind of made my eyes roll. But what I found myself just really appreciating about this movie was that kind of that feeling of going back to basics when it comes to filmmaking. That kind of filmmaking of old. You know, yes, it's not the deepest, most complex or layered experience you're going to get this year, but it still pulls you into the drama. I was always locked in on these characters' journeys because it's exploring themes that I feel like a lot of us are going to be able to relate to and connect to, you know, about falling down in life and having to build yourself back up, remembering to sort of live your life for the things that you love, kind of real basic, in many ways, human themes that I felt the film does a very effective job at exploring. And it kind of, it's in many ways very inspirational, I felt. It's a very feel-good movie. And that, you know, sometimes that's all you want when it comes to a film. You know, you don't always want these incredibly deep and emotional and profound experiences. Sometimes you want to go to the cinema for 2 hours, or in this case, 2.5 hours, and just be entertained and have fun. And I was. And just going back to the runtime, this movie's 2.5 hours, and I didn't feel a minute of it. I thought I was going to be honest with you. Like, I was thinking to myself, how can they drag this movie out around sort of Formula 1 for 2.5 hours? but it works, and a lot of it is just down to sort of how it's all constructed with the narrative and with its characters. Like, there isn't a moment in this movie that I feel like you could have taken out, because it all sort of adds to that kind of the build-up to these characters' sort of conclusions with their journeys. And so when I say, you know, there's nothing really special about the story, I mean, it kind of is, because it does explore kind of very real human themes about sort of, you know, finding your place in life or finding yourself again and all of that. And, you know, I really appreciated that aspect. There were aspects that I could connect to with these characters' journeys, specifically Sonny Hayes, played by Brad Pitt. And you've kind of got this generational conflict there as well going on. And so, you know, there are themes that you can relate to, which makes the story special. And I think they explore it well. But, you know, it is very familiar as well. Like, I kind of got a hint of Rocky Balboa as well as Gran Turismo. They were kind of like a mix of the two, really. And more sort of the Rocky films, it kind of had that sort of essence about it, which isn't a bad thing. Because, you know, again, the Rocky movies, they explore these kind of very real human themes, and I think this movie does a really good job at kind of capturing that. And, you know, there is a weight there to the performances. There's a weight there with these characters. Like Brad Pitt, you know, he's someone who was on the verge of winning in the 90s, winning sort of, you know, the Grand Prix, and there's this disaster, and then he sort of falls, and he goes through sort of like a string of divorces and all of that, and then he kind of sort of rediscovers himself, really, in a way, and sort of rediscovers, you know, or remembers what it was that he loved in life. And that kind of just, that story and just how he brings that to life, it just felt very authentic. It felt very kind of natural within this story, within this experience. You've also got Damson Idris as Joshua, this rookie, and again, I kind of really liked how he brought his character to life. Like, he evokes, through his performance, he evokes all the right sort of emotions. You know, at first, you do end up kind of really, well, I did anyway, disliking the character, and it kind of plays into sort of the you know, the generational conflict and all of that. But then sort of his character's journey and sort of how it evolves through the story, you really, well, I did end up coming around to the character, and it felt satisfying. Like, the journey of the character felt satisfying, because it put you sort of on this kind of an emotional ride with the character, because you go from sort of feeling one way towards the character, and then by the end, you're actually there with that character. Like, you're behind him. And I think a lot of that was aided by sort of the performance. And then you've also got Javier Bardem, I think that's how you pronounce the name, apologies if it's incorrect, as Ruben. And again, sort of inject an incredible amount of weight into this movie. Again, not the most complex, you know, written character that you're going to get, but just down to sort of how he brings the character to life. Yeah, I mean, there's a weight there, and there is enough, like I said, within the writing to just sort of allow you to somewhat care for these characters and their journeys to some degree. And then just to touch back on traditional filmmaking here for a moment, and the 90s. The score in this movie by Hans Zimmer, I loved. It is thunderous, it's intense, it elevates those moments of intensity, like the racing scenes. And, you know, there's a piece of music, I don't know what the name of it is from the top of my head. It's a piece of score. You sort of get it at the beginning within the first act, and it's also within the final act during the final race. And it is incredible. It is thumping, and it just really took me back to classic Hans Zimmer scores from the 90s. Like, there's an element of the rock in there, and it just had me smiling, and it kind of added to sort of that overall feeling or essence of the movie when it comes to sort of how it was crafted. Like, it kind of really sort of just, yeah, it kind of just added to sort of that old sort of traditional style of filmmaking approach to the movie, and the score was just amazing. And I kind of just want to touch a little bit more on sort of that kind of the emotional aspect of the story, because I know I've sort of said a couple of times now here where, you know, this isn't the most, you know, the most emotionally complex or deep movie you're gonna get. It's very sort of cliched. It kind of goes back to basics. It's quite stripped back when it comes to the human aspect, but at the same time there is enough there for us to care, you know, within the writing and within sort of how these characters are brought to life from within the performances. But, you know, from a filmmaking perspective, from just how sort of the film is constructed with its narrative and just how it plays out from a technical perspective to the, you know, to the sound design, visually, it's all those other pieces, no matter how, you know, how basic the story is and sort of the characters' journeys are, it's how all these other different pieces is what makes this experience as effective as it was, I felt. You know, for example, there's a moment in the third act, and it involves Brad Pitt's character, Sonny Hayes. He's in his car, it's the final race, and it's a moment that connects to something that he says earlier on in the movie to another character about having this feeling of peace when he's behind the wheel. And there's a moment that, you know, he just feels like he's flying. And it's this moment that he's constantly chasing, that he wants to try and recapture. And this moment, you know, it's a moment within the third act that hits really hard. You can only see Pitt's eyes, but you could feel the urgency behind the eyes. You can feel sort of the feeling of peace and calm and determination that the character is going through within that moment. And that's just testament to Brad Pitt's performance within the movie, and accompanied by how the scene is brought to life from a technical perspective. You know, like I just said, to the sound design, the visuals, all those different pieces of the puzzle, no matter how basic they are, it all accumulates to a thrilling and intense and a surprisingly emotional moment that made me want to fist pump the air. You know, it's an incredibly emotional moment, and it caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting to have a moment like this in Formula One, I'll be honest. But it's sort of, again, testament to just sort of sometimes, you know, the trick is to go back to basics and not to overcomplicate it, but also have characters that are well written enough for us to be able to connect to it to some degree. And a lot of that usually is going back to sort of kind of these very sort of core kind of human themes. You know, and Joseph Kosinski, you know, with his approach to Top Gun Maverick, he does the same thing here with F1, and I think that's one of the main reasons why it does work. Yes, you know, it's not perfect. It is very predictable and familiar, but like I said, sometimes, you know, at the end of the day, these movies are designed or just meant to entertain, and as long as they, you know, immerse you within the stories and you actually care about the characters to some degree, then they are doing what they're designed to do. And I was, for 2.5 hours, I was entertained. I was always locked in, and a lot of that contributed to sort of how the movie was brought to life. It does have this kind of very kind of filmmaking of old sort of vibe to it, or essence to it, from the way in which it's crafted. It's not relying heavily on CGI, like you're not having the camera sort of zoom into the exhaust and you're seeing the pistons fire of the engine and all of that to sort of help elevate a moment, because you don't need that. You're there within the moment already, because you do sort of to some degree care about his characters and just how these moments are constructed from a visual perspective to a technical perspective. Like, I just love how the cameras were used within those moments. It is fun, it is exhilarating, and it is intense. And there are moments where I had my mouth open in sort of gasping in horror because of what was playing out, or just sort of smiling with joy. And sometimes that's all you need from movies, from cinema. And there is that kind of sense, that kind of old school sort of sense of filmmaking to this movie that I absolutely adored. And so, yeah, look, enough rambling from me. You know, they are my thoughts on F1 the movie, and I will be giving F1 the movie thoughts on F1 the movie. But what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Are you a fan of Formula 1? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the review, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot. My next movie review will be for Megan 2.0. I am kinda looking forward to it. I'm intrigued. I was very excited for the first one because I just liked the idea, I liked the premise, the concept, but I was very disappointed by it. I do feel like that first movie had a little bit of an identity crisis. At the same time, I can't help but be intrigued by this sequel. Like, I'll be honest, the trailers, it looked, from watching the trailers, it looks fun. And yeah, I got a lot of stuff planned for the coming weeks, months, year. And I just want to say another massive thank you to everyone that has supported me. You know, my subscriber count is growing. It just will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV. I do have a retro review on the way for Crack in the World. That is coming. I'm just a little bit behind on those videos, but they are coming. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.